Hello, bonsai friends. This is Evan Pardue of Underhill Bonsai, and welcome to episode 33 of Little Things for Bonsai People, the podcast. This time, I am joined by my co-host, Carmen Leskoviansky. How you going?
Hi, how's it going?
How you going?
How you going? I'm going. We're Australian now.
Yeah. Do they say that in Austria?
Yeah,
Not
instead
in
of
Austria.
how
Oh
you
man,
doing, they say how you going.
really?
Yeah.
Oh well. I know we have a handful of Australian listeners out there. So how you going? I apparently stumbled upon one of y'all's greetings, and I'm still gonna say
Maybe that's
y'all.
how it started. That'd be hilarious. How you going?
How you going? Anyway, but yeah, for you guys who don't know, we kind of stopped mentioning this earlier on, but Carmen is Michael Hagedorn's current apprentice at the Cartegus Bonsai Garden. And I probably said Cartegus wrong. But anyway, and today we will be discussing our recap on the American Bonsai Society Learning Seminar. I know y'all love it. We've been talking about it. Seems like every episode now, but we're back. This is the last time you're gonna hear about it. But we have some trees. This is an interesting episode where we have some trees to talk about from the show that we really liked, and then we're gonna do some critique on them. Carmen, kind of give us an outline of how this critique's going to work, because you put it better than I did earlier.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we figured we'd, go over what happened in Denver since we've been talking about it so much. We couldn't just come back and, not say anything. So we've got some interesting trees, and we'll go through and say some of the things we really like about them and some of the things that, could change to improve the tree, and go from there. I think kind of like our usual critiques.
Yeah, so none of these critiques are like, because the tree has bad qualities or this is a bad tree. Full respect to all of the people who design these trees and care for these trees.
100%.
But these trees will be posted on our Instagram. You can go over to Little Things for Bonsai People on Instagram, and under the description where it says trees from the Denver ABS show, episode 33, and you can go look at the trees. We're going to go through them in order. I don't know if we're going to get through all of them with the time we have, but we got about what I got on there, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we might get through all these. Some of them I thought were interesting, and some of them were worth talking about. And I unfortunately did not include the Best in Show conifer on this list, but we can also
Which
recap
was the
that.
Best in Show conifer? I thought it wasn't this ponderosa. Which one was it?
It was Dan's tree. I can't remember Dan's last name, but Dan with the really tall spruce.
Oh, I thought that was the John Naka. I thought Best in Show
that was John Naka
the
Award.
the this Pondy by Dusty, but I'm not sure.
That's one of the ones we have on the
I think
list.
so. I think that was the one.
Okay. Well, we can go back. I'm sure someone's gonna make a post later on. You can go to Rocky Mountain Bonsai Society, and I'm hoping that they'll have a list either on their Facebook or maybe on their website showing the winners of certain awards. But before we get too far, let me mention that this podcast is sponsored by our amazing patrons over on patreon.com. We have a list of patrons called Bonsai Best Buds, and they've been supporting the show. Starting the list off with Tori Solis, Warehouse Rat, Boyd Snellgrove, Ricky Ruins, Joshua Bentley, Snappy Chappers, Ryan Giordano, Joel Jenkins, Justin Knight, Backyard Bonsai Australia, the ladies at the flower market. Actually got to meet her at the show. She was really nice. Taylor Peacock, Chase Pertweet, and Vicky Off. Thank you guys so much for supporting our show. Every little bit counts. It helps us grow, helps us keep going and sharing the love of bonsai, and it puts a smile on our face because, man, do we need a lot of reassuring that bonsai is not an easy career. So, but anyway, yeah. So these trees, like, let's try to recap do you remember the awards that you can remember?
I'm looking at somebody's post so that I can actually see.
Oh, so somebody did make a post about it.
Yeah, Dan from Backcountry did. Yay, Dan. I got to meet Dan. It was so funny. I got to meet so many people that I've only met online. um, including the co-founder of the Purple Pot Society. I'd never actually met her in person, so it was really fun to actually, meet the person that
you
I
started
started
this
this thing with.
By the way, plug it in there. Purple Pot Society, real quick.
Oh yeah, so Purple Pot Society, that's the National Women's Bonsai Group, founded by myself and my friend Sam. And it was really cool. We had a table at ABS. We did a panel on women in bonsai, and we were able to award a scholarship to one woman there to cover her costs, so that her funds, instead could go to her workshop material and whatever else, to help pay for the conference. So it was really fun to actually be able to do that and like see our mission in action. So
yeah,
super cool.
And congratulations to the winner of the scholarship too.
Yeah, Jamie Harrington. Woo!
Yeah, awesome. But yeah, they had, I know as far as awards, there was best in show, and then there was your typical list from down there. It was conifers, best conifer, best deciduous, John Nocco Award, which is, I think
that's for best native tree.
That is the best native tree award?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I didn't know if best native tree was separate from John Naka. I thought it was separate because that was like an ABS thing.
I think that John Naka, I think it's a native tree. I don't know if it's specifically listed, but I think that's generally what they do with it. I'd have to double check.
Just quick check. Has my mic been coming in clear?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, good. But yeah, so did you find a list of winners or did you?
I don't have everybody. There was also Best Kusamono. This was the first time ABS hosted a Kusamono display for judging. And what else was there? I can't remember all of them. Was there a Best Tropical?
There was.
Best Tropical.
I think one of the trees we're going to be looking at, I think it won that.
Oh, did that one win?
I believe so.
Amazing. I'm going to look it up on ABS and see.
Yeah. Like I said,
see if they have it.
They'll probably have it there. If you can find it later on, we can revisit that.
Mm-hmm. But and there was the new talent competition.
Yep, the new talent competition that was presented by Superfly Bonsai. Got to meet the runner and owner of Superfly, great guy, Andy. Shout out to him. Go over to superflybonsai.com. He's a good dude. Not sponsor or anything, just a cool guy. So yeah. And then do you remember who won the new talent?
I think I don't know for sure. I don't know if it was a second place or a first place. I think it was no, I can't remember his name.
On this episode, Evan and Carmen jogged their memories.
Yeah, on this episode, Carmen and Evan stumble through award winners. Congratulations to everybody who won an award. We're so sorry we don't remember your name.
Oh well. But yeah, anyway.
It'll be listed somewhere at some point, but I cannot find it on the internet.
That's fine.
It was Josh something.
Josh something. Congratulations, Josh something.
Congratulations. Or he was a runner-up. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Oh no. It was Dave. His name was Dave, who won. New talent. We should edit this part out. This is terrible.
I mean, it's funny though. So if it doesn't get too much more embarrassing, I think it's just enough for Matt to keep it in.
Yeah, I think Josh was a runner-up. I got to talk to him after. He was super cool. Dave, I can't remember his last name, but he was the winner of new talent, and I remember his juniper was very nice. There was a lot of talent in the new talent. I've been to some of these shows where they've done new talent, and there were only 4 people in the competition, or some of the trees came out looking a little bit rough, but
yeah, everything was consistent across the board.
I think there were like 16 participants. This was the biggest one they've ever had, and a lot of those trees were pretty well done. Like I think it was a pretty good competition. Kind of a whole range of work that people were trying to do, different kind of styles, and really nice material too. Really nice Shimpakus.
Yep. Yeah. Kind of give more of a visual, I guess an audio visual For the listeners, they gave them all these really awesome Shimpakus. They had really nice twisted trunks, lots of good movement, and just enough foliage, like good branching and stuff to kind of go through. And I think I would have judged it in a particular way, and maybe it was judged this way. I think they were looking for a mixture of good wire application and also form, and then best use of material. Because I mean, we're talking junipers, and juniper is the material for form, because the foliage is usually pretty straightforward to kind of wire out, and then you're looking to either frame in your silhouette or your feature of your tree. And that's kind of my take on the conifer mindset. I don't get to work with a lot of conifers, unfortunately, but that is probably the most honest and straightforward approach. What do you think? Do you think that's how you think about it?
Yeah, I'd love to see what they were judging on. But I think they were looking for overall, structural wiring of the trees. So did people pick, a front that was good, that showed the movement? Did they add shari? Did they add deadwood? Was the structure of the branching, correct? That might not be the right word, but did it make sense? How the branches were bent and moved into place? How were the angles of, the branches set? Was there enough foliage left on the tree for it to survive? Was there too much left on for it to be considered styled? And did people, tilt the tree? Did they give it a new angle, or did they just use it, kind of how they got it? So they were probably looking at a bunch of those different things, and there's kind of a whole range of what people did there. And I think that.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm just talking now. Go ahead.
That's okay. When you said tilt it, it tilted me. It's kind of a joke, but like I get tilted by the fact that people don't tilt their trees.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's super lame. But one of the things I think that a lot of beginners, when they go in, they take a piece of raw material and they don't know what to do with their material, and they think there's something off, or they're looking for more on a trunk line, or you're just not happy with the way the tree is angled or stands. I think tilting is one of the most underutilized aspects of bonsai design that anyone that is working, especially with something as versatile as a juniper conifer species, because it's very difficult to change these certain things about these trees when it's as simple as like, and some of the trees we're gonna be looking at here in just a second. I remember you saying, we were looking at some of these trees in person. You were like, if only you would tilt that tree, not tilt it like, just cantilever it, but tilt it as in twisting tilt, like towards the viewer, like a certain aspect of the deadwood, or get a better branch placement because something was moved just up or down or backwards or forwards. So
especially when it comes to Yamadori, and there's a lot of Yamadori down there in Denver. It's like prime Yamadori country. It's all alpine conifers. It's great. And but you get these trees and you can't change that trunk that's 300 years old with all this deadwood. So how do you make it more versatile? You tip it, you angle it. Even here in the yard, when I'm working with junipers, we've been growing out for 15 years that haven't totally been styled yet, but we're kind of getting there. I almost go as far as turning them upside down. Like I put them all the way, I look at it from every direction to see if there's something better than what I'm seeing. So, when we were there, I was definitely noting that some of these trees could be, just a little bit more interesting, or, a little bit more impressive if you just tipped it or shifted it a little bit, to put some of those points of interest towards the viewer.
Yeah, that's a really good point on that. Like, especially on the Yamadori I had mentioned, there's like such an old piece of respectable stock. You just can't change that easy. So let's go ahead and get into it, since we have plenty of beautiful trees to look at. And we'll unfortunately, Mike couldn't be here to talk to us and talk with us about this first tropical that we're looking at. So I should have all the photos lined up in order. So the first one that's going to be on the Instagram under Little Things for Bonsai People. Go to episode 33. It's going to be in the comments of the images. It's a tiger bark ficus. It's looks like a cream colored pot, and it's got it's a very robust tree. I mean, this tree is I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's a chunk. It's a chunky tree. Yeah. And I have some points I would like to make about this tree. But I would you don't get to see a lot of tropicals like this where you're at currently.
Yeah, correct.
So what's your first impression before I go off on a little tangent here?
Well, so back at the University of Michigan, we have a fairly sizable tropical collection, and they're varying in quality. We've got some really nice ones. We've got some that kind of need some work. But out here in Portland, I really don't see that many tropicals. And my first impression of this tree was that it was really, really, really great, particularly for a tree in a show. I feel like a lot of times I see a lot of ficus in shows because a lot of beginners start with ficus, and you don't always get this kind of chunky, thick trunk, thick branching. There's a lot of ramification. It's just a really beautiful tree. It looks very much like you would expect a bonsai to look. Just really healthy, nice small leaves, good branching, good ramification. Just overall, I was impressed with it. I really liked this one.
Are you ready for my critique?
Also, the moss is really nice. Also, I know who did this tree, and she's also very nice.
Oh yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting her.
Oh, I know. Not that it's anything against the person. I like.
No. And my critique's not to be mean, like we said earlier, but these are things to improve. And these are my opinions too. I mean, you can take this for a grain of salt. So
I don't even have an opinion.
If the owners of these trees are listening, sorry. But
Feel
also
free to send Evan an email.
Yeah.
Not me. No, I'm just kidding.
My email is Evan@Underhill Bonsai. I have no shame. I look at bonsai all day long, and if I say something weird, then I'm sorry. But yeah, the first thing that stands out to me is how robust the base is. And that's really great. And one of the best things about tiger bark ficuses is their textural bark. And the more surface area you have of that to show off, the more impressive it is, the more people are going to be looking at that trunk, and the trunk's just going to feel bigger and bigger. And the pot selection is one of the things that I think that's just enough. But I feel like the container could be a different glaze. I think it's a little too similar to the trunk's color. I think I'd like to see it in something a little bit more suggestive of a texture as textured as the tree is, because tiger barks are not smooth. They're not like a ficus benjamia or other kind of like your silvery smooth bark ficuses. They have a little bit of a rougher texture. So even an unglazed container with like a darker tone and some grogginess to it, like something that would feel, in my opinion, a little more appropriate. Now
I like the pot otherwise though. Like I think the shape is great, and I think the size is really nice because it's just a little bit small, which makes the trunk look even bigger.
Yeah, it makes it look massive. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'd be fun to play with different colors and see what else you could do.
It might be as simple as getting that same shape and just getting it unglazed, or getting something that's bluish, greenish, teal. I've seen some really great glazes, matte though, not something crazy poppy because it's not a flowering plant. But one of the things that kind of makes me, and I'm a little bit more critical on containers. Containers are easy to switch out as long as it's properly sized. It's not a major thing you have to ask from for the tree, especially if you can slip pot or make an easy transfer. So that's not as offensive as a critique, I feel. But the way that the tree is so big, that you need a pot that feels a little masculine, but it's a ficus, so it kind of teeters on that back and forth. So I do like that the pot doesn't have a decorative lip. It's the solid straight line lip. So that's
it's a really
nice.
Strong pot.
Yeah.
But it's a very soft shape.
Yeah, soft shape, and then I think the color is just a little too soft. So that's just me, but I do agree. Coming up from the top to the mossing was beautiful. I like to see the moss right on the rim or right like just a little above the rim, not mounding. We're doing a great job here for what I see, and this tree is right up my alley too because I love little short fat trees. I know I showed a broom style big grandiose water elm, but I do like short fat trees a lot, and a lot of my Yaupon hollies look like this.
I would happily have this tree in my collection.
Oh yeah, but as I come up the trunk line, I see something that's fighting a little bit here. We have this beautiful branch that drops to the right, so this is going to be from left to right for the viewer here, and that branch is beautiful. It's chunky, it's huge. It sets precedence for the rest of the tree, which is also as gnarly. And we can get away with gnarly, chunky trees because of if you guys have listened to Mike's expressions on Taiwanese influenced bonsai, there's a lot of grotesque, chunky, big things that kind of seem like they break the rules a little bit. But given that this is a ficus and the style in Taiwan is a little bit more of a big, giant chunk and quick. But you could see the movements in this, and there's a scar down in there on that first branch where you can see it sunken in, but that's enough to give it that interest point to carry you through that branch. And so my point here with that is that branch on the left is too similar, in my opinion, and it pulls you into a T pose. And this is me, but I would cut that off to the next shoulder and throw some asymmetry on that tree, and I think it would be stellar. And then you could let the crown come out. It comes out a good bit on that side, but then I do see right above that left piece too, there's some foliage that looks a little unkept. And with ficuses, we could be real particular. We could line up all this foliage into you see the padded lines to this tree. So some detail wiring on that. You could defoliate this tree very easily. Tiger bark ficuses are very strong. So one of the things that the artist could do is could go in there and tidy up that canopy. And I feel like it really would dial this tree in and take it to that next level. That's me being very crucial.
No, I like it. I think a lot of times when you do show ficus and stuff, especially in Taiwan, you see a lot of things defoliated, so you can really see all of the ramification. And this tree has a lot of ramification, and I think it would be interesting to try showing it without its leaves. I don't think I would cut that branch on the left off, but I think I would maybe reduce it so that it didn't really draw your eye over as much, because I kind of like it. But some more definition between the pads. And I think, it's hard to see because it's the way the lighting is in the picture. But I think if you did show it defoliated too, you could get that real clear distinction between all of the pads for sure.
And I'm not talking about completely remove that thing back to the trunk base.
Just to the shoulder. Yeah.
Yeah. You see where it comes up and there's a clear space between the foliage there. I would take it to there.
Right in there. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because then you could grow yourself a little nice, finer, not
there's
nearly
already
as
like
coarse.
a little branch right there. Could just thicken that up and lay it down
and work with it. Yeah.
It's a nice little tree.
It is. It's a cute tree. I like it. And it wasn't very big either. This tree's probably Chuhin sized.
Yeah, like 12 inches ish.
Yeah. It's very, very nice, compact. And like you were saying, there's not a lot of tiger barks like this out there that you get that good of a base on it.
It's really, really meaty.
Yeah. I think this one got best tropical, but I don't want to go in on
or
it.
Was it the bluebell? No, it wasn't.
The same artist also had the bluebell. I didn't take a picture of the bluebell, but the same artist had a bluebell, which is the Desmodium. It's also a spectacular tree, had just crazy amounts of twisted movement. I've seen those trees down in Florida, how they are developed and stuff. Getting a tree with that caliber it had about like an inch and a half or so trunk base down into a beautiful flare on the Nabari. And it just was a really erratic back and forth tree with lots of good movement. So yeah, kudos to this artist and having tropical plants that are good. I don't know if she was a resident to the Rocky Mountain Society Club, but
she is.
Okay, yeah, because a lot of the other stuff that we were seeing were alpine. So, but yeah, any closing statements for the tiger bark?
If you ever decide to sell it, let me know.
I know a guy. He lives in Florida. He might be able to hook you up.
Yeah, he's got some nice trees, I guess.
Yeah, he's got some
mostly
stuff going.
Shohin, nice little chunky trees.
Yeah, we might be able to talk to somebody about
I could reach out to him maybe.
All right. All right. So the next juniper or the next tree is a juniper. This is a species of juniper I'm not terribly familiar with, but
Rocky Mountain?
No. Next one over, it'll be the short, squat juniper New England glaze. Juniperus horizontalis. So it's a Hughes juniper. And this one, I wish that this one was, as far as the arrangement of the display, I feel like there was more to be had with this tree because like the stand that it was on and where it was placed, it really didn't like ask people to come look at it. It felt a little off the side, unfortunately. But yeah, when you're looking at this picture, it feels less impressive because it doesn't fill up the stand as much. But
it was a chunky. It was another one like Chuhin size, real thick base, but it was kind of out there in the open. So maybe a more restricted display area.
Do you see the picture?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I wanted to talk about this one because I found this juniper to be pretty different compared to, and when I say different, I don't mean anything bad. It's just a little not what you expect, because with junipers, usually strong junipers have strong trunk lines and defined elements in the way that it's structured. And I think the showcase here is more the deadwood, which I found the deadwood to be very charming on this tree. It's got this grotesqueness and kind of twisted nature to it that doesn't really show off the live veins as much as you would expect too. That's another thing that kind of caught my eye with it, is like it's maybe a lot of the deadwood, I mean the live veins that attach the deadwood, maybe they come from the back much more. And we're getting more of a driftwood style kind of thing going on here. But yeah, I see a lot of padding in branch placement that is just not typical. But at the same time, I didn't dislike the design. I actually appreciate it because it felt a little bit bold for the material and the way that the way that everything's just kind of arranged. So before I go too far into how I feel, what are you thinking on this one? Because I remember you were a little indifferent about this one.
I'm torn on this tree because I'm drawn to it. I like it, but I think there's some things that could be improved that would really kick it up a notch. Probably the biggest thing that I noticed about this tree is that most of the foliage is juvenile, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But it seems more as though this one's been treated kind of clip and grow to create the pads, like you would with some of the other needle junipers, rather than the scale junipers. I think when this one has mature foliage, I think it has a scale leaf or whatever.
Yeah, I'm looking it up to see the Hughes juniper. I'm looking up to see.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit more of a coarse juniper.
Okay. So I think I'd like to see some of the pads kind of wired out and maybe I guess it depends on what the artist is doing. If they're treating it kind of like a clip and grow, and keeping the juvenile foliage on purpose, or if it's just been cut back really hard and kind of in that juvenile phase. I think the deadwood is really interesting. Usually with juniper, there's more twists in the trunk, and so you don't really have a lot of twists here. Some of the younger branches could be wired out and kind of twisted at this point, and then cut back to in the future if that was something the artist wanted to do. But it might not go with the tree because it's kind of a different style for a juniper. But I liked how, I think bold was the right word. It's a thick trunk, kind of a small tree, and it has a presence.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to I think the flow of this tree is down to the right, and so I think it's too far over in the pot to the right. I think I'd like to see it moved over to the left.
Mm-hmm.
And
I can
then
see that.
Those two low branches are really close as to which one's lower. So it's kind of tricky even to tell, but I think it's a right flow tree. So I'd like to see it moved over towards the left in the pot, and I think that would help a lot with the overall balance of this tree. And the deadwood might actually be sticking out of the pot at that point, which could be really interesting.
Yeah, I do agree that it does have a right flow. And I'm gonna say something zany again, like I said with the ficus, like the the branch flowing to the right. I feel like if it was my choice, it was my tree, I would cut it right off and change the flow entirely. I would cut that off, and then where the crown comes up and it makes that round kind of shape at the top there, I would cut that back even further.
Yeah.
I see some thinner branches that maybe, and I don't have a 360 of this tree, but it looks like you could bring one of those branches around and kind of make something a little bit more wild. Because like you said a second ago, it's like it's a juniper, and it's an interesting choice to have a short, fat juniper, because junipers usually have very pronounced lines, and they are doing something very asymmetrical. Whereas junipers don't always grow like this, so it might be a little bit more of a naturalistic take on their opinion on what like a juniper would look like, a little twisted, short, fat one that has just enough resources. But at the same time, when I see a lot of deadwood on a juniper, I always assume that there's some kind of tragedy or in its life that it went through, either high winds, maybe a nearby fire that almost scorched it, sun bleaching. So basically what I'm saying is just asymmetry in junipers really wins the it's the game winning thing right here with these trees. So I personally think it's too balanced.
I can see that. I mean, it's got really dense foliage. I'd love to see some more definition of the pads, and you might be able to create some of that asymmetry without having to cut a whole branch off. But I could see where you're going with it. I'm like, nobody can see me except you, but I'm definitely closing my eye and like covering up parts of the tree with my hand so that I can revisualize it. But I think I figured out why this one strikes me. I feel like juniper bonsai are generally very kind of elegant and graceful, even if they're real thick and fat, like they've got these really light kind of cloud pads and these real twisty live veins and deadwood. And this one's just like, it's just here. It's just like thick. It's a little like rock just in the ground that you would stumble over, so it looks very wild. And maybe that's what I like about it. It's very wild and rustic looking.
And I remember me and you had a conversation about while we were there walking around this day, we were doing a bunch of tree critiques, just like kind of like just between me and you, and we just for brain games and challenges. And one of the things I did mention to you is like, if there's a style that doesn't seem like the superior, like end all be all for this tree, and there's an appreciation for like another type of style or something that is purposely done a little bit more, I'll just say it, like a little bit more simplistic, You know, they like the grower and the caretaker of this tree, maybe they wanted to really emphasize the simplicity of this tree's care. So yeah, and clip and grow is a good way to put it, because I don't see any wire on this tree or any indication that wire was used to create its form. And I like that. I kind of like that.
I mean, that's one way to treat a juniper. Just keep it in juvenile foliage and treat it, you know, like a needle juniper, which maybe that's what they wanted to do.
Yep. And I don't know if this was a landscape plant or if it was collected from that area. I don't know if Hughes juniper is a native to the Rockies. But, you know, either way.
I feel like horizontalis is one that you can find in a landscape nursery. So I'm curious whether this one was something like an old shrub pulled out of somebody's yard, or I don't know if they are native. If
it was urban Yamadori, that makes it even more interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I love me some urban Yamadori. So Yardadori. But yeah, the pot for this is one of those ones where not only does the tree need to move slightly to the other side, that's a good opinion on it, but this is a pot where I would change it to a bold, straight wall, looks like a brick pot. No character to the pot, just looks like a cinder block kind of type thing. With a dark, nice, deep, hardy glaze, like not glaze, I mean tone to the clay body. Barely any foot. Just foot's like straight to the ground. You can barely see it. You know, I think that would really make this tree shine even more with its animalistic, unique kind of feel to it. So,
I can see that.
Yeah, because this unglazed container has some scenery on it, and I'm just, and maybe it's Beijing. Maybe we're reading the tree all wrong, and it's meant to be more Beijing.
Totally could be. I would say for the pot, at the very least, it's a little bit long. So if you just even took 2 inches off of that pot,
in that direction, that you don't like it coming out,
it would make it look even chunkier.
And here's a note on pot size for our listeners: is sometimes we can underpot trees, and sometimes we can overpot trees, and this is, I think, a pretty common mistake early on is, and it also could be a budget thing. Some people will get into bonsai and not expect to spend money on bonsai pottery, but if you have a good bonsai source, like I was going to say bonsai pot source, but if you have a good outlet to go get your bonsai pottery, then you should be able to find like the different sizes pretty easy. But if your access to bonsai pottery is limited, then yeah, I could see choosing something that's slightly too big. And I see oversized pots more than I see undersized.
I agree.
So
I think people overestimate how much space their tree needs sometimes.
I get what you mean. So next tree. So the next one's a crepe myrtle. And this is another tree that I wanted to talk about this one because I love crepe myrtles. Crepe myrtles were one of my first, actually was my first victim. I'm just going to come out and say it. They are my first victims. Crepe myrtles in Louisiana are very, very common. Everyone loves them and hates them because back in the day, whenever these were in vogue to plant in your garden, I don't know if this was going to be like the 80s or the 70s, or maybe I don't know around what time people thought this was a good idea to start just throwing crepe myrtles in the ground. But there's so many crepe myrtles here, and it's nuts because these are one of the trees that, and we should do a whole crepe myrtle episode because I think
I don't know enough about them. I just hear that people either love them or hate them, and usually it's hate them. Not in regards to bonsai, just in general. People are always like, "Oh, more crepe myrtle." I don't get it.
I think they're a super underutilized species. I think they're used to not their full potential. There's so much more we can get out of this species.
Are they messy? Like, is that why people don't like them as street trees? Like, do they make a mess?
Well, okay. So there's a couple of things they do. Yeah, okay. That's a good point. One of the things they do is they grow like here in the Southeast United States. So it's like Texas, Louisiana, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, yada, yada. They grow so fast and they grow so rampant, and their roots that I've never encountered roots like I've have on a crepe myrtle. That crepe myrtle has a root where you cut into it and it's so sharp it will cut your finger. Like it comes to like a blade's point. So they have the most brutal roots, and you cut the roots and you could sever the tree from, you could have the main root system of the crepe myrtle, and you could have the runner coming off of that, and you could sever that and the runner will become its own tree. And then the tree that was cut off won't even care.
Okay. So it's essentially bamboo with a flower on it.
Yeah, it's like bamboo with a vengeance. It grows into multiple trunks and it will completely take over if you don't watch it.
Okay.
They crack sidewalks and driveways. You chop them down, and let's say you chop it down and then like you were to abandon that thought of the chopping that tree down. In 10 years, it's right back where it was. You can chop the thing flat to the ground and suckers will come back and it's there again. The flowers, yes, the flowers are messy. They flower very strongly through I think their flowering time just started now. So they're just starting to come into bloom. So for us, it's like late May going into late August is when they finally stop.
Oh, wow.
So their flowers are big, giant clusters of blooms, and they can vary from it's like, oh, we should do an episode on crepe myrtles, and then Evan goes straight into it. No, but their clusters can be massive. I mean, we're talking like a foot long of flowers.
I've seen them like hanging over streets, just like because they're so heavy with flowers.
Yeah. The flowers get so heavy, the branches literally like droop down. God. And the litter from the flowers is pretty immense because they make a lot of flowers and they don't stop. They have a long flowering period, and then the seed pods come out, and those can even germinate on certain varieties, and then they can spread. Invasive as hell. And so one of the biggest complaints with crepe myrtles is that people will plant them next to their homes as well, and they get aphids really bad. And if you don't treat your crepe myrtles, aphid runoff. What's the proper word for it? Yeah, there you go. Honeydew everywhere. Black your walls, black your AC unit, black your vinyl, your everything. And and you have to pressure wash your driveway to get all that crap up. Yeah. So what you're really saying is that crepe myrtles are terrible in the landscape, so you might as well just pull them up and turn them into bonsai. Yes.
Okay.
I will say that bonsai hunting season's like Yamadori
season on crepe myrtle.
Hunting season, Yamadori crepe myrtle season is always open. Go out there and pull these things out of the ground, because when you pull them out of the ground, doesn't matter what you get. If you chop that thing back real hard and you got a little bitty tiny bit of root on there, stick it in the soil and just water the hell out of it. It's gonna come back. I mean, these things are tough, and that's why I say like they were my first victims, because I mean, I did some really crazy cutbacks on these trees. I did things with carving on them that was just not right, like drill holes through their trunks and they take it to an certain extent until it boils in the sun or freezes to death. But yeah, I chose this tree to critique because it takes me back to a simpler time. It takes me it takes me to a place with crepe myrtles that I really want to get back to again. I think this tree is awesome. And I would like to hear your take on it, Carmen, because whenever it comes to the deadwood feature on this tree, I don't know where this tree was collected. If there is crepe myrtles in the Rockies, I don't know. If they're like a landscape tree they use. It gets really cold, so I don't know if it.
I don't think they would live over the winter, but
you'd have to greenhouse this.
Yeah. And
in my range, this is a deciduous plant. It loses its leaves. It's like a deciduous tree here. And some other ranges, it never drops its leaves. So, but what I look at with that trunk, that screams like New Orleans, like go down to New Orleans and you see crepe myrtles that look like that all day long. These trees that are like 100+ years old, some of them have seen like the century of the city back in the day, and they're abused. Like they've been ran into with like cars. They've been cut. Branches have just been sliced off of them for no reason to clear them for like get them off the streets. They've grown into the concretes and melted over the sides. And this tree screams that to me. It has that twisted nostalgia crepe myrtle, old, craggy, holes punched in it. And I think it's a better descriptor of like an urban tree. I think that's where I'm coming from this. It's not a natural depiction of what these trees do, which is a big, massive canopy tree with a very smooth bark that exfoliates. Instead, we get this rough, bone white deadwood that I've seen. I don't know about you, Carmen. How does this tree hit you after you hear my rant on it?
So I love the trunk of this tree and all of the deadwood. Three things specifically. One being that usually when you have deadwood, you still are able to see where the live vein is somewhere in the front, and I can't quite see it. So I'd love to see this tree from an angle where you can also see where the live vein connects to the soil line. But that's not as important to me as, if that didn't happen, I don't know that I would care that much because the trunk is so interesting. This tree overall feels not ready to be shown. It feels young. The trunk is old, but the branching isn't there. I would cut back because there's so much natural deadwood, and then kind of where it stops, it's this blunt point. So I would actually maybe take it down to where that live branch is coming off to the right there, and make sure that that's like really your next move with this tree, and then somehow make this other deadwood point kind of real craggy so that it kind of matches, because right now it just feels like kind of a blunt cut. But I just think that this tree needs more time. The trunk is there, but the branch development just isn't there yet. But I think it's something that I don't know how fast this is going to grow in Denver or from wherever it's from, but in 5-10 years, the branching could be really, really amazing. I mean, what's there right now structurally looks like it has good movement. In the young branches, there's good movement. So just making sure that develops with taper and to get it ramified and thicker and older. And then maybe a different pot. I like the pot, but it seems like ultimately the tree could use something a little bit more, I don't know, maybe rugged. I like that it has a color, but I think I might like something a little bit less.
And I feel like this tree it's probably just, I didn't see a name tag for it, so it might have just been part of the collection, but I did want to talk about it based off of, like, all your points are very valid for that. And it's one of the times that I kind of like might go in and be a little bit more controversial with the way I would approach this tree. Because I see what you're saying, like developing the branch structure, but the way that I know crepe myrtles, the way that I understand them, Carmen, no, the way I know them, this is not too far off of how I would present this tree. So, because there's something to the minimalistic nature to this tree, because it's not one of the small leaf variety crepe myrtles. So one of the things that you'll always have an issue with this one in particular is that the fact that the leaves are going to always be that big. I've done a lot of leaf reduction work on crepe myrtles. You can get them down to a reasonable size, but on some larger leaf varieties, it's never going to happen, really. It's very tough to get them to do that. So this is probably the quality of the leaf on this tree. So if that's the case, if your leaf is bigger, and this is my take on it with presenting bonsai, I do agree that that's a blunt cut where that comes up. And I see a little bit of live vein. This is a different take on how a tropical or a bonsai is displayed. And so the only thing I would change as far as the design, we do have this branch that comes off the top of that chop, is what I would call it. And I would take that branch and shorten it, for one. and show off that branch that is to the right that kind of comes up and it twists around the backside. I find that to be very interesting. Emphasize that movement and take away from those front facing ones. And I would probably even carve that bad boy down into, and this is the one, it's like Evan's just over here chopping everything off of these trees. I would cut all those branches off and go into that one line and almost do something literati-esque. I know we were talking about, oh, if it's a failing tropical, don't just go for a literati style. But this tree, knowing the way that crepe myrtles grow, there's enough bottom branches that we could do something that could embellish that deadwood and really show off that deadwood more. And I do agree that the pot isn't correct because it feels weird for what this tree is.
Yeah.
But I think the pot's worth playing around with. You could do some crazy stuff with the pot with this, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's this one type of pot that I've seen. We have a potter nearby called, he goes by the name of Byron Myrick. He's called Byron. But no, he made a pot that I have in the shop that I've kind of been back and forth on. It's been sitting there because I could see why a lot of people don't like it and would be kind of weirded out by this pot. But the lip of the pot, like the rim, the lip is like super exaggerated. So it like comes out. And I'm sure you've seen stuff like this before, Carmen, where it's a basic bonsai shape, but then the top is like, it's like surrealism. Like it just comes out really far.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that pot and I like that design. And I feel like trees like this with a lot of expressionism in them would be suited for something like that. I don't know if that's the right pot, but it takes us to another world.
You could go a little bit kind of modern arty with it, or like you could take it to a little bit more of an extreme because it's a different kind of tree.
Yeah.
What if I'm looking at chopping things off since we're talking about it? What if do you see where that live branch comes off of the trunk and then takes a hard turn to the left?
Yeah, that's the one I actually kind of like.
Yeah. So were you saying cut everything above that off?
Cut everything that goes along to that trunk line off. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. So if you just had that branch going to the left, because otherwise, if you're going to go back and forth and then up to the right and keep that canopy kind of towards the right, you get this real SE kind of tree. But if you just cut it so that, the next movement is that sharp left, that's really interesting. That's a lot more interesting. And I really do think the chop is distracting me here. And so if that were whittled down somehow, or the taper was, kind of, so it wasn't as like blunt, I could see that. I think
you could go as far as to like carve it like really sharply into that.
Yeah.
Crepe myrtles are durable plants. So this thing could take it.
Well, and considering how much is there on the bottom versus how smooth the deadwood is up towards the top, you could really do a lot more with it.
Yeah. And it's a crepe myrtle. One of the things that I witnessed whenever I was early on in bonsai was I was walking around Guy Guidry's nursery when I first met him, and there was a crepe myrtle that he really didn't enjoy. And he took out his bypass pruners and he chopped this like 2-inch trunk to flat to the ground, like to like a couple inches tall. And he said, if you can't work with it, then you ought as well just start over. So that's kind of one of the things too, is like this tree could be cut where that comes up. You can see where they get that one knot where it feels natural and then suddenly it goes smooth. You could cut it there. If you've got live wood back there, cut that thing down. And then you could build like that dense foliage over the top of that. But then I feel like it would be a little contrived. So
oh, that word again.
Yeah, contrived.
It's bonsai. Everything's contrived.
Everything's an idealistic.
But I know what you mean. Actually, I'm glad that we talked about this one because I really, to be honest, I overlooked this tree because I thought that the branching just wasn't. I didn't think the branching matched the trunk, but after talking with you about it, I can see a lot more potential in it than I could to begin with. And so I really do appreciate that.
It's a fun tree. And
I mean, the trunk is amazing. I just would love to see the top half match the bottom half as far as age goes, or I mean, not age necessarily, but like in kind of maturity. So,
and that's the thing with crepe myrtles. If you ever get your hand on one, I mean, I can dig one up for you.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
that's like I said, underutilized. There's so much could be done with
Mm-hmm.
it. I've seen people down here do some wacky, crazy stuff with them, and then outside of Louisiana, it's difficult to find them like
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Yeah.
that's why I was like, this is an awesome start. There's a
It's cool that
lot
it
that
was
could be done.
represented there too, because there was so many alpine conifers. It was nice to see some variation. And actually, I'm like looking at it from a distance now, and it kind of looks like a horse's skull, like the bottom of the
Yeah,
base of the trunk. It's
kind of
really neat.
like bringing up like Nick Lynn's kind of qualities.
Yeah, there's
So
sculpture in that deadwood. It's
there's
cool.
definitely room for that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let's move on to our next tree. It's that's the bristlecone pine. But yeah, this tree, I don't see a lot of bristlecones. It's extremely uncommon in my range for sure.
Yeah.
I think their range goes from like Arizona, Utah, Colorado, just all like not Midwest, Southwest range. And do you guys deal with these? Do you have any like
No, I've never really dealt with bristlecone.
okay. Um yeah, bristlecone's weird. I know it kind of got popular for a second.
Mm-hmm.
They started blowing up because of the American species, like North American bonsai species movement.
Mm-hmm.
It was starting to kind of come up. And I don't know if bristlecones, I've seen some good bristlecones, but I don't, and I can't base it off of this one because I've only seen a handful of bristlecones.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I remember like walking to the garden and seeing this tree, I remember overhearing somebody talking to the curator, which by the way, the curator's name was
Larry Jackal.
Larry Jackal, awesome guy. If you go to the Colorado Botanical Gardens, he maintains a beautiful collection. So yeah, and I remember talking to the curator, and somebody was like, "Is this tree sick?" And they were like, "He's like, no, it's a bristlecone pine. If you look really close on those needles, there's like little points of sap all over them.
They're
It's
supposed to
very
look like that.
it's very weird.
That's very weird.
They like bleed out. Like they just kind of every once in a while they just kind of go through this cycle where they kind of bleed out into their needles. And they got these little white specks all over them.
Weird.
But yeah, I find them to be very intriguing. I'm very happy that this has been picked up. Like these North American natives are starting to really shine.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the way we're looking at this image, it's turned. I know that's a little distracting, but I'll fix the image for Instagram. But yeah, this bristlecone was your pretty straightforward size wise. Like this is like your ideal size bonsai tree. So those needles are quite big. They're bigger than well, they're not big, they're coarse. They're thicker
Mm-hmm.
than you would expect on some pine varieties, you know. So I mean we looked at a lot of ponderosa. I say that we are like in a world of ponderosa out there, and all the ponderosa pines have anything from like 4 inch long needles down to like half-inch long needles.
Mm-hmm.
And so uh but the kind of bushy pom nature of bristlecones, you can do a lot with this, um there is something to be said about this tree because I without even going too far, I know this is a collected tree. Because of the way the root system is. And
Mm-hmm.
the way the artist has chosen to get the angle they needed at the compromise of showing those roots pop up out the back of the container. That's one of the things that really stands out to me. But I don't really have much of an issue with it because of the Yamadori appreciation and aspect of these trees.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Um, so my biggest comment about this tree is that it doesn't, if I didn't know it was a bristlecone, I wouldn't think it was a bristlecone. It's styled a lot more to me like a lodgepole or a spruce or a larch would be. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I feel like when you see bristlecone in the wild, they're very kind of straight trunked, twisty, really rugged looking trees, where this one is very, very graceful. So again, it's not a bad thing. It's just not what I would expect from a bristlecone.
Mm.
Um, And I really like the roots on it. Um, I think I think that you could get a lot out of this tree if you took off the top 1/3 to half of the canopy,
Hmm.
and brought it way down. You would lose that kind of tall elegance that it has, but it would be a really interesting, mature, rounded canopy. Even if you keep the angle that it's at, I think just compressing the top a little bit, bringing that top apex kind of down with the other two branches just below it to really round that crown out would be a big improvement.
Mhm.
Um, it's an interesting tree. I like what they did with the roots. I like the deadwood. I like that it's front and center. Um, but yeah, it doesn't read as bristlecone to me. But like I said, not necessarily an issue.
Yeah. Um, and I agree with the top. The top kind of comes to a point,
Mm-hmm.
and this was one of the other discussions that we were kind of
Mm-hmm.
going over, and I feel like I want to kind of go over like a I hope this is the right way to say it, classical
Neoclassical. Mm-hmm.
neoclassical. It's
Mm-hmm.
in the in like art history observation type setting, we're referring to styles that are a reflection of what once was, and someone is coming in bringing that and updating it slightly, but still appreciating where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
So the pointed crown on this one, I like it, but I think it's a like I do agree that it's a little too pointed. I would
Mm-hmm.
still keep a pointed crown, but soften it a good bit. So like where that final piece of the canopy, the apex comes up and then curves
Mm-hmm.
out slightly,
Mm-hmm.
I just cut it off. Yeah, come down to that piece that points back to that really cool deadwood piece that is just not, it's kind of just taken away from when the line draws really hard that direction. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, this would completely morph the directionality of this tree
Yeah.
if you took that piece off.
Right.
Uh,
Which I think I mean, I would cut it back all the way so that the deadwood is the tallest part of this tree. So even that bit that's pointing towards the deadwood, I would take off. It would
you would go
completely
even
change the
further.
directionality, but I think I like it.
Yeah, and I didn't want to like say something that would bring it to this point where, and I'm not saying that's what you were saying, Carmen, is that when it
Hmm.
comes up from that where the Takagari hits that first branch,
Hmm.
that thing is so S curve.
Hmm.
And so I think if you brought that crown down too far, you might just hit that like super S curve tree.
Yeah.
And you lean into that way too much because when
Hmm.
with the way that that crown draws your eye up through that, then you see the rest of the movement in that.
Hmm.
So maybe I would even think is to go, because this is my impression with pines or conifers, stuff like this. The trunk, if the trunk line is brilliant, like this one is, and the tree is taller and skinnier,
Hmm.
less weight in my, kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
So maybe even that branch that drops to the from the left to the right on that right side, maybe even
Hmm.
dialing that in
Yeah.
and making the tree even stronger, like a slope.
Hmm.
Because I think there's something to be said about like the way that the trees grow in that area. And this is a
Yeah.
bonsai culture. This is a
Hmm.
completely different culture than me and Carmen understand. So,
Hmm.
um, so, but I remember what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say I agree with you that it is a very thin trunk. So making sure that the pads are nice and tight and kind of close to the trunk, even reducing some of it could be helpful. Not even necessarily reducing it, but compressing it a little bit more inwards. Tall, skinny trunk, shorter, smaller pads. If you have
Mm-hmm.
a thicker trunk, you can get away with bigger, heavier looking pads. But I think too, there is a bit of an S in this trunk, and the roots are so interesting. They're kind of towards the back. This is one where I wonder if you rotated it slightly counterclockwise um,
What would
at
happen
all,
with that?
if you might be able to minimize that S because more movement isn't always better movement, especially if it gives you an S or a C or something like that. So I wonder if Even just rotating this a little bit would give you slightly more a different movement.
Okay.
I'd be curious. You were going to say something. I cut you off.
Oh, no, it's fine. I mean, I was just kind of going on about bonsai cultures,
Mm-hmm.
but we're running short on time, so me and Carmen have agreed that we would pick up critiquing some more trees. Like you said, this is always something good to do, to look at bonsai and talk about how to make them better as a teaching tool.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same token, if you own these trees, like I said before, this is your tree. If shows how this is how you choose to grow the tree, then it's yours. It's your bonsai. But for teaching purposes, this is why we show and display bonsai, is so that we can have a critical eye.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and this is something I do want to bring up in a later episode, is how to appreciate people who are unfamiliar with bonsai. And we talked about this while we were walking around.
Mm-hmm.
How to appreciate bonsai from people who don't understand it at all. Like,
Right.
they've
Right.
never seen a bonsai, or they just don't know what they're looking at. They don't even know that this is a bonsai. They look at this and they go, that's interesting. And it
That's
becomes
cool.
purely art.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so I would love to do a whole talk on the way of seeing things. There's actually a book that I would like to read through and then kind of refer to for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a BBC publishing. It's called the way of seeing things, I think is what the title was. But I'll have to,
Yeah.
that would be a great topic,
I
because that would bring it up. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we should, because there's definitely a way. The way we're looking at it is through the eye of a bonsai artist who's looking specifically at structure, placement, plaid placement. I'm deep in Portland right now. Pad placement, um, you know,
Yeah.
trunk line, like all these really specific things about structure and layout of these trees, not
Mhm.
even considering what's the impression of the tree when you walk up to it, which is what most people are experiencing. Most people are experiencing trees. They're not looking at, these very specific things. So it's a really interesting conversation, kind of looking versus seeing bonsai. I love to have that conversation.
Yeah. Bonsai at an eye's glance.
Mm-hmm.
Next time on BBC.
Yeah.
Um,
Next time on Little Things for Bonsai People.
um, but yeah, do we have enough time for the word of the day really quick?
We got 4 minutes. Let's go.
Okay.
I
Four
have to get to
minutes.
the park.
Yep. 4 minutes. Bonsai word of the week.
Ooh, what is it?
Defoliate.
Ooh, oh God, I
Defoliation.
could do a whole episode on defoliation.
Quick summary of what defoliation is. Go.
Oh God, didn't we talk about this already?
And in other episodes, but it is
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. No,
our,
defoliation is
our last bonsai word of the week was the candle, so I thought this was appropriate. Go ahead.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Defoliation is the act of removing entire leaves,
Or half
or
leaves.
parts of leaves in order to stimulate backbudding and to allow light to penetrate the canopy and stimulate backbudding.
Yeah. Energy
to balance
balance.
the energy of a deciduous tree.
Yeah. And I do a lot of deciduous, and you do a lot of deciduous in your range. Mm-hmm. Balance, energy balance. By the way, at the time of this episode's release, which will probably be tomorrow, from when we're recording, it's a pretty great time to defoliate a lot of trees.
I was just doing that before I got on here.
Yep. You want to defoliate because the sun is going to get super intense, and you don't want to over transpire, and you don't want to shade out certain parts of your trees that are going to be really getting the sun in the next couple of months here. One of the things I feel like with defoliation that really needs to be talked about too is defoliate, then rotate. And then rotate when you get the growth where you're not getting balance, and then rotate again. 90 degrees every week. That's, in my opinion, and from the way that I treat my bonsai, especially my deciduous, that I'm trying to increase ramification, increase quality of mature branching, defoliate, get some air space in there, turn the tree, and then turn it again, and then turn it again, until we get to the end of this cycle of back budding. Because every little light angle in there is not gonna, you're not gonna hit everything with every angle of light. So
unless you're like in the middle of a field and the sun's directly overhead.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which most of us don't have that.
Most cases there's a fence in your house and your shade cloth and
other trees.
And other trees in the way. Yeah. So yeah, defoliate, rotate your tree, get light in there, back bud, deciduous trees. Don't defoliate your junipers.
No, don't do that.
Yeah. So don't fully defoliate.
No, even a full defoliation isn't actually a full defoliation. It's all a trick. And then different species are full or partial. Like you wouldn't defoliate a beech, but you would partially defoliate a beech, which surprisingly isn't taking off, every other leaf. It's actually cutting the leaves in half. And then tridents are different than Japanese maples, and elms are different than all of those, and yada yada yada. So definitely look into what tree, look into the techniques of how to defoliate your specific tree. But I love defoliation time. It's fun.
This is a light touch on this topic too. Just remember that for all of us.
We could talk for hours. It's so hard with word of the week. Maybe we should always make like the next episode as a follow-up on word of the week so I can just vomit out all of the information I know.
It gives us more time to think about it and revisit it. But yeah, we're coming to the end here. Let's go ahead and just say it real quick. For our listeners, thank you for listening this far in.
Thank you.
You can go over to Little Things for Bonsai People on Facebook and Instagram. Follow there. Go check out some content. We're working on the Facebook page. Give us some time. You can go over to patreon.com/Little Things for Bonsai People. Become a $5 patron best bud. You can be a bonsai best bud. You can drop into our Discord, talk to us, hang out with us. I see some trees going in there, some project trees. People are talking about trees they want advice on. This is a good time to start talking. Earlier, the better. I haven't
been in there for like a week. I'm gonna go on there.
Yeah, and we might even have to schedule a time that we drop in and say, hey, we're gonna be chatting and living it up. We're gonna be partying in the Discord. And then head over to underhillbonsai.com. Go check out my stuff. Go to all the Instagrams, Facebook stuff for Underhill. And then for Carmen,
you can find me at Becoming Bonsai on Instagram, on Facebook under my real name and under Becoming Bonsai. And you can check out the Purple Pot Society, the International Women's Bonsai Group. Let's see, where are we? We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on the World Wide Web. And then check out Mike. Where's Mike at?
Yeah, he's about to shoot over to Texas and start teaching some Shohin workshops.
Ooh, fun. So,
yep, go over to kitsunebonsai.com. Yeah. Go check out Mike. Mike's
he's
awesome
on
guy.
Facebook and Instagram as well.
Yep, cool. Well, thanks for hanging out, Carmen. We'll pick up on critiquing some more trees and looking at some bonsai, and I think we'll have a special guest. I have someone lined up for next week, so we'll see what we'll get. But yeah, thanks for hanging out today.
Okay, bye.